match your feeling. Search Nissan Feel Electrified and book your personalised test drive with the experts in electrification. Join us at the Feel Electrified event between October 8th and November 8th at your local Nissan dealership. Test drive subject to availability.
Using my Barclaycard Forward credit card to pay for the stuff I need now could help build up my credit score for the day I need something bigger. So buying a set of headphones or weights for my workout, smashed it, could help in the future when I want to rent my first flat share. Now that's forward thinking. Check if you're eligible at barclaycard.co.uk. 33.9% APR representative variable subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's apply. Responsible use of a credit card can help build your credit score when you pay on time.
The contraceptive pill is now available for women.
There she is, Concorde on our maiden flight, London to the Big Apple in 3 hours and 30 minutes.
The UK's first human heart transplant has been completed, supported by the British Heart Foundation.
We were a noisy generation, but it might be something quiet we do that becomes our greatest legacy. Leave a gift in your will to the British Heart Foundation and fund groundbreaking research that could help save millions of lives. Search BHF Wills.
I'm Julius Caesar, an emperor, not a tradesperson. But if I was, I'd be on Checkatrade. 8 out of 10 homeowners surveyed would choose a tradesperson from Checkatrade over one that isn't. And they guarantee your work for a year. So apply today. Up to £1,000, T's and C's apply.
This autumn, discover the Mazda SUV range. Choose between the compact, stylish Mazda CX-30, the award-winning family SUV Mazda CX-5, and the all-new Mazda CX-60, Mazda's first ever plug-in hybrid. Each one crafted in Japan and available for delivery sooner than you might think. To request a test drive, visit Mazda.co.uk today. Mazda. Drive together.
Calling all landlords and developers. Is your residential building empty? Maybe it's half full. Introducing FineFair, the rent guarantee company. FineFair will guarantee your rent for 1 to 5 years with no commission or management fees. Join thousands of owners already guaranteeing their rent through FineFair. For more information, call FineFair on 0208 554 0500 or visit us at finefair.com. Subject to acceptance, terms apply.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Tom Swarbrick.
Kyron's in the Peak District. Hi, Kyron.
Hello, mate. Nice to speak to you again.
And you, sir. Go on.
I've just got one question, really. If we were all living in the Truman Show and Boris did come back as and Boris did come back as Prime Minister, who's going to have in his cabinet? Because all his mates stabbed him in the back. Pretty much the whole party performed a coup. So I'm just kind of wondering who would have as
don't worry about
Secretary.
That. Don't worry about that.
Chancellor.
They'd all come back on the basis of, well, I'm doing my bit for the country. The country needs stability at this time. Let's just forget everything that happened. Again, it goes back to the point, Karen, about the Tory party not dealing in reality anymore. It's surreal, and deliberately so, because reality is too difficult for them to confront at the moment.
Do you know what, though? Do you know what the definition of irony is? And you and I spoke a few weeks ago when the pound crashed.
Mm-hmm.
I use another name then, and the definition of irony is people like me who are traders are laying the ground here for us to make obscene amounts of money because it is so inept. We just know.
Oh, sure.
The market is.
Karen, do you know? I'm glad you. I remember our call vividly because it went a bit viral online actually afterwards, Karen. If someone could tell me how to short the pound, I'd know. I think I'd have a good go at knowing when it was and might make some money, but I can't risk it because I'm terrified. Karen, thanks very much indeed for the call. Let's have a word with Ben Kentish, RBC's Westminster editor. Ben, we heard your voice in the scrum of journalists speaking to Graham Brady and Jake Berry a little earlier. The key moment is 2 p.m. on Monday, by which time we could, in theory, have a new Prime Minister.
Yeah, spot on, Tom. If nobody but one candidate meets the threshold of 100 nominations, and the only candidate that did would automatically become the next Prime Minister. I think unlikely that happens, but it's very possible. There's also another scenario, equally unlikely, where nobody meets the 100 nomination threshold because it's split between so many different candidates. Quite what happens then, Tom, anyone's guess at this point. But the bar has been set deliberately and very high. In reality, I think you're probably not going to get more than 2, I mean, it's 3 maximum candidates in that race, because, of course, there's only 350 or so Tory MPs, 357, I think. So it couldn't be more than 3. Who is it going to be? You would expect Rishi Sunak, if he does indeed run, to almost certainly get that number. I'd be surprised at this point if Penny Mordaunt didn't. But the name on everyone's lips around here, Tom, is still that of Boris Johnson. I thought that he would really struggle to get 100 nominations. I still think he might, but talking to a pretty senior Tory MP who is anything but a fan of Boris Johnson in the last few minutes, they thought that the Red Wall MPs, having seen what happens when Boris Johnson isn't their leader, might all tie in together, club together, and try and get him back in. It would be an astonishing sequence of events. It would undoubtedly be the most divisive candidate, at least in the terms of the parliamentary party, that the Conservatives would pick. Another senior Tory said to me he'd burn the building down if Boris Johnson makes a comeback. There is no consensus, to say the least. That is putting it very, very mildly. There are deeper divisions tonight than there were even last night, because the camps have already been divided, the fractions have already got their campaigns underway. The big problem for the MPs, Tom, is there's absolutely no agreement at all about who it should be, and more than that, there is already a lot of venom being directed at Boris Johnson, a lot of venom being directed by supporters of Boris Johnson at Rishi Sunak. The person who's yet to sort of be on the receiving end of too much venom, at least in the conversations I'm having, is Penny Mordaunt. Is she the sort of unifying figure that could come through the middle, or will be revealed, Tom, by this time next week?
The possibility, therefore, exists. It's an outlandish one, it's an outsized one, but the possibility does therefore exist that by 2 p.m. on Monday, Boris Johnson could be Prime Minister.
Yep, that is absolutely a possibility, Tom. It cannot be ruled out. Is it likely, as you say? Yeah. Probably not. But if I'd said to you 6 weeks ago that that was even a possibility, or equally, even perhaps less surprisingly, that Rishi Sunak could be Prime Minister on Monday, I wonder what you and everybody listening to this would have thought might have happened in those 6 weeks.
Good to speak to you as always, Ben. Thank you. Ben Kentish, LBC's Westminster editor. David's in Windsor. David. Just going to say, the hemorrhoids are not a laughing matter, but carry on.
Well, no, they are. They totally are, because they really screw your day up. And to be honest, so does Boris Johnson. So, I mean, where can they go? What can the Conservative Party do?
I take your point about the hysteria that is setting in. David, we'll leave it with that image dangling. We'll leave it there. David, thank you. Richard's in Scarborough. Hi, Richard.
Yes, just listening to your last call. I wonder if Boris would come back from perhaps he could go on us from Barbados, or where he happens to be, from a sun lounger, sipping cocktails. I don't know.
He's already on the flight. We heard is he? We heard from Rachel Johnson earlier. He's on the plane back, not least because they've got until Monday to find 100 MPs.
Well, I just beg his belief. I mean, I don't know. I think the problem is that all the factions are coming home to roost. The things that have been going on in the Tory party for decades are all coming home to roost. It's a cult, it seems to me. If anybody can sit there and say that Boris Johnson should be brought back in, what are they talking about? The man's a criminal. He's committed all sorts of offences. He's, more or less let the bodies pile high. All those things. And yet he seems to be somebody that it's a cult of personality almost. I don't understand it. Penny Mordaunt, I don't know. She answered a few questions yesterday, but the other day.
Well, we're going to find out, Richard. We're going to find out, and possibly as soon as Monday 2 p.m. But I tell you this, thank you for the call. The extinction level event that I talked about for the Conservative Party in the immediate aftermath of the 23rd of September we sat here and said that the Conservative Party under Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak had just gone out to the non-threatening asteroid and diverted it straight into Earth's path. We are at the stage, I think, this evening that the asteroid has slammed into Earth. The 20-foot tsunami is visible from land. The skies are darkening and burning ashes falling because the extinction level event for the Conservative Party in any capacity, whether it's Mordaunt, Sunak or Johnson, is still very much underway. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Back with you at 4. At 7, Ian Dale right now, tonight, with Andrew Marr.
Thanks, Tom. Well, as predicted all over LBC, Liz Truss has gone. She was Prime Minister for just 44 days, a shorter time than any British leader since democracy evolved. The Conservatives are now trying to foist yet another Prime Minister on us, with a certain Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson apparently pondering his shock return from the Caribbean, and with Penny Mordaunt and Rishi Sunak also likely to have a go. Well, that's them. What about you? What does all of this mean for taxes and cuts and the bills every family faces? I'll be talking to a wide range of leading Conservatives and to the opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, after the news.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, Liz Truss says she will resign as Prime Minister after the shortest term in history. In her 44 days in office, Ms Truss endured political infighting, economic turmoil and significant policy U-turns. She now says she can't deliver on the mandate she was elected on.
I have spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Conservative MPs wanting to become the next Prime Minister have been told they have until 2 p.m. on Monday to secure the backing of 100 of their colleagues. That means there can only be a maximum of 3 candidates who'll make the first ballot of MPs. A hustings will also take place on Monday. There will be a rapid online vote by Tory party members if there's more than one candidate, and a new leader will be chosen by next Friday, October the 28th. In other news, US citizen Anne Sakoulas has pleaded guilty to causing the death of 19-year-old Harry Dunn by careless driving. The motorcyclist died after a crash outside a US military base in Northamptonshire back in 2019. And a major inquiry into child sexual abuse has urged authorities to make it against the law to turn a blind eye. Its chair warned the extent of the problem cannot be underestimated and victims aren't being looked after properly. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 19 points at 69.44. The pound buys $1.13 and €1.15. LBC weather, rain confined to northern Scotland tonight, windy and showery in the southwest with a low of 9 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Lottie Morley.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening to you. Elizabeth of Bohemia was much mocked long ago as the Winter Queen because she was on the throne so briefly. Well, tonight we have our own one. Liz Truss was Prime Minister for 44 days, a shorter tenure than anyone in our entire democratic history. She had tried an economic experiment in unfunded tax cuts and a bonfire of regulations for which the British people had never voted and which exploded on its first contact with economic reality. Now the Conservative Party are offering us yet another Prime Minister after what will be an unprecedentedly short selection. Among those thinking of running, apparently, is a certain Boris Johnson. Already, Tory MPs are talking about defecting to Labour or resigning and causing by-elections if he dares to do so. So that is all going swimmingly well. Rishi Sunak, the former Chancellor, and Penny Mordaunt, who delighted Tory MPs in the Commons this week and whose campaign PM for PM is already up and running, are almost certainly candidates too. There'll be a high bar. They'd need 100 Tory MPs to back them, and there may or may not be an online vote of members next week. But should the Tories be able to foist yet another leader on this country without asking us first. In a few moments, you'll hear the opposition leader, Keir Starmer, tell me about his plans for a stable Labour government following an early general election. The opinion polls say he would romp to a huge victory right now, which is, of course, exactly why Tory MPs are unlikely to give him the chance. Before we crack on, I just want to say one more thing. There is already a kind of deranged conspiracy theory going round on the right of politics that what's happened at Westminster is a disgrace and a globalist coup manipulated by shadowy bankers and internationalist liberals. To which I would say, respectfully but firmly, phooey. The Tory party imposed on its MPs a leader who tried an experiment which didn't work and for which nobody had voted, and so they've got rid of her. It was messy, scrappy and undignified for sure, but that's what Parliament is like, an all too human and ruthless version in miniature of the country itself. What happened was no angrier or more extraordinary than events I have seen, for instance, during the fall of Margaret Thatcher, or John Major's fight with the Maastricht rebels, or the bitter Commons battles over Brexit. This isn't a conspiracy or the failure of parliamentary democracy. This is parliamentary democracy working. On which note, I've just been speaking to the Labour leader, and I began by asking Keir Starmer to remind us exactly why he was calling for a general election.
We've got a clear choice. We either carry on with this utter chaos, and it is utter chaos, there's nobody who uses any other word, or we have the stability of a Labour government coming in, stabilising the economy with a credible plan for the future. Andrew, this, there's some sense in some quarters this is just a sort of soap opera in the Tory party. It's not. It's doing huge damage to our economy and to our reputation, and the public are paying the price for it, and they're entitled to a choice, and not just a revolving door, the next chaos, or who do we next want up for the experiment at the top of the Tory party. There is an alternative. Put that before the public. Let them make their choice.
You've said the Labour Party are the stable alternative. There is a £70 billion hole in the public finances as a result of recent events. Day one, what do you do to start to deal with that?
Well, some of the ways in which we deal with that we've already laid out. So we've been saying for a long time now there should be a windfall tax on oil and gas companies made excess profits. That would go, a considerable way to dealing with the price of the energy freeze. That's obviously now 6 months rather than 2 years. So there are things, the non-bond status we've said we would abolish. There are things we've laid out already.
So there are some specific tax increases. Do you think that you could handle this crisis without making spending cuts?
I'm very conscious of the fact that until the last few weeks, nobody was discussing spending cuts. If I'd been doing your programme a month ago, we wouldn't have had a discussion about spending cuts. They're a direct result of that kamikaze budget. Now, I ran a public service for 5 years during a period where we took spending cuts, and I know what that feels like, and I know that there aren't many public services that can take much more by way of spending cuts. So I'm not going to go down that route. I do accept, and I have been saying, I said it at a conference, and I said it earlier this week, that it may mean for an incoming Labour government that we can't do everything we want to do as quickly as we might like.
Do you know in your own mind what you'll pause, as it were, or delay?
Well, obviously, we don't know the economy that we'll inherit. We don't know when that election will be, and therefore I'm not going to set out now what that may be. But I do want to level with people and with my own party and with the public that I wouldn't go for austerity, but I recognise that they're going to leave such a mess in terms of finances that good Labour things that we want to do, we may have to do more slowly than we had intended.
But you can't rule out some kind of efficiencies or moderate cuts in public spending, because you're going to inherit an economic position much worse than Harold Wilson did in 1964, much worse, much worse than Tony Blair did in 1997. And this is going to be in a completely new territory, isn't it?
Well, they are going to leave absolute chaos when it comes to the economy. They've done huge damage to it, and we obviously have to look at what that looks like when there is the election, and as I say, that means we won't be able to do some of the things we'd like to do as quickly as we would like to. But as I say, having run our public services, I say they're on their knees. Everybody who works in public service says no, they're on their face. I know what efficiencies mean. I know what back office efficiencies mean. A lot of that was done when I was running a public public service. It's very difficult to take much more out of our public services and to deliver a public service.
If it came to it, tax rises on those with the broadest shoulders rather than further public spending cuts.
I want a fair taxation system, and that's why we've said, and we were critical of the government for what it was going to do on corporation tax. And no business, by the way, is coming to me saying the problem here is corporation tax. They're saying the problem here is we've got no stability, we've got no certainty, we can't make investment decisions. We want to partner with the government, but there isn't a grown-up government to partner with.
Now, talking of grown-up, we're in a very fast-moving situation this evening, but there are very credible reports that Boris Johnson is throwing his hat back in the ring and would like to return. What would be your message to Boris Johnson if he is planning a return to the top?
Well, I remember it was 3 months ago that he resigned, just about, and he resigned because his own front bench, his own party, had declared that he was unfit for office. There were dozens of resignations coming in over a period of days, and they all said the same thing.
But they found someone unfitter.
But it wasn't a policy issue. That they didn't say to Boris Johnson. And Theresa May, for example, who I've got a lot of regard for, respect for. I knew her when she was Home Secretary and I was Director of Public Prosecutions. That was a policy issue that she couldn't resolve. With him, it was character. They decided that he was unfit for office. So, Andrew, the idea of an experiment over the last few weeks with Liz Truss, which has cost people additional mortgage payments in hundreds of pounds every month, cost our economy, cost our reputation. The idea that you go from that economic chaos back to a man who I always said he was unfit for office, but his own party said he's unfit for office. So the idea that you go from this carnage, this chaos, back to a man who's unfit for office, I mean, if ever there was an argument for a general election, that has to be it.
So, Boris Johnson, I think he's still on holiday, thinking, what am I going to do next? What is your direct message to him? Stay out of this.
I would invite him to dust off and reread all the resignation letters that he received in July, because all of his colleagues wrote saying how unfit he was for office and they couldn't serve him any longer. And I think they should all dust them off and reread them as well.
Now, whoever they choose, there's a huge range of public spending cuts and tax increases being looked at by Jeremy Hunt. Those have to get through the House of Commons. You call for an election. Of course, if you're a Tory MP, that looks like political suicide, and they're unlikely to vote for that. So are you expecting some kind of breakdown in the House of Commons leading to an election over the course of this winter or early next year? Is that what you think is going to happen?
Andrew, you'll have been talking to Tory MPs. I think many of them are despairing. Many of them feel that it's time their party went into opposition and healed its wounds. And so the choice for them is it's simple. Are you going to put your party first, or are you going to put the country first? And if they put the country first, we'd have a general election. But we're in unprecedented times. We've burnt through, 4 chancellors, 2 or 3 home secretaries, 3 or 4 prime ministers. This is unprecedented. And so there is this just clear choice: carry on with this utter chaos, or have the stability of an incoming Labour government. And the public come up to me as I go around. I was in Brighton this morning, and I've got a very, very strong sense that they feel this is embarrassing, it's a mess, it's chaos, it's costing them, and they're saying, why shouldn't I have a say in what happens next?
Finally, 44 days as Prime Minister, the Winter Queen, as it were. Liz Truss has had, by any standards, a pretty miserable time. At a human level, how would you write her political obituary?
It's a failure. It was an experiment that should never have been carried out on the British public and has cost us dearly. On a human level, I've got no ill will towards her. She's
you feel sorry for her?
She's under huge strain, and I'm on a human level. I wouldn't want to see that in anyone, but I would gently point out that for millions of people who can't pay their bills this winter, for millions of people who can't actually afford £200 or £300, £400, £500 more on their mortgage payments, they're under huge strain as well. And forgive me if I speak for them.
So, Keir Starmer, it's been a busy and extraordinary day. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
In the name of God, go. Now, that's a famous parliamentary rebuke, and I think it was last used by the Tory MP David Davis in the final stages of the collapse of Boris Johnson's government. Davis, a former Brexit secretary, knows the Conservative Party almost as well as any living person. He now has to decide where he's going to put his support in the frantic week we apparently have ahead. I spoke to him a few moments ago, and I began by asking him whether he was sticking with Penny Mordaunt, somebody he backed last time round.
I started with Penny because she I thought at that point was had significant advantages. And then I went on to Rishi Sunak, to many people's surprise, because they all see me as a very low-tax Tory, but I was concerned about what was being proposed. Now the scene is a little different. I would be happy with either of those two, but I know Penny's a fantastic presenter and so on, but we're also in a circumstance where we're at the moment dancing to the tune of the markets. We've got to get off that, and I think there are arguments to say that Rishi as Prime Minister will get us off that problem quicker. So I would be happy with either, but I haven't quite decided yet.
You haven't quite decided. Now, of course, the other figure rustling around in the rhododendrons is Boris Johnson, apparently thinking about a comeback. What would be your view of that?
Well, I wouldn't be too happy about that. I mean, look, first thing to remember is that he's got 3 months of Privileges Committee hearings about him or against him, however it turns out, which on the unlikely chance that we elected him back to be Prime Minister, he'd be the first person coming in with a Privileges Committee against him straight away. So we've got that problem. Secondly, some of the problems we have now start with Boris having too narrow a cabinet. When Boris was leader of London, he had really top-class people around him. It was a gathering of all the talents. He didn't really do that when he came in as Prime Minister. He pulled together all the people who were very loyal to him, and they weren't necessarily the best people available, and that was carried on by Liz. So that problem was created by him. I don't want to see that extended. So I can see Boris loves to be in the limelight. He loves to be in the centre of things. He is an attractive character. And he has had electoral success, of course, but I think that will be pretty short-lived this time round. And we've also
clambering onto a plane, I think, more or less as we speak, from his Caribbean holiday. Would your message to him now be keep out of this?
I say go back to the beach, frankly. Look, the sorts of problems we have to solve. We've got really big technical economic problems to solve. He's not qualified for that. We've got really big follow-on problems after COVID on healthcare. That's not really his area anyway. He's a great exponent of other people's work, and that's not going to be feasible. The Prime Minister we get now is going to be front and centre with the public, with the markets, with the unions, all those things. Difficult technical problems. That's not Boris's area of skill.
And yet, having this truncated selection process means that whoever has got the biggest name recognition is favoured. I mean, your party members are going to have a very short time to put their cross somewhere, just a few days, and they know who Boris Johnson is, and that means he may have a built-in advantage in this new system.
Well, he may have a bit of a built-in advantage if he gets to the last round, but what is the lesson of the last...
You think he might not get to the last round?
I don't think he'll get to the last round, and let me tell you why. What's the lesson of the last weeks and a few months? It's that you need absolute rock-solid support in the House of Commons, the parliamentary party in the House of Commons, in order to carry you through all the difficult decisions and the inevitable mistakes that a future government will make. They will make mistakes. No government existed that don't make mistakes. And I don't think he has that support. And I think that will be what will disqualify him from getting the final round.
Very interesting. Finally, David, whoever takes over, it's going to be a very, very tough and in some respects miserable couple of years, because as Jeremy Hunt has laid out, there have to be tax increases now, and there have to be public spending cuts, he believes, and those things will be quite hard, I would imagine, to get through the House of Commons, given the state of the Conservative Party and the nervousness of many of your colleagues about their future.
It will, but I'll make one point, and it's a point I've made to both Rishi and Penny already, and that is, what we need now. I mean, we have a credibility issue at the moment. We've broken our own credibility in the last 4 weeks. And what we need now is a cabinet of all the talents. And actually, on the backbenches of the Tory party, there are lots of people who've been in...
It's often said there's more talent on the backbenches than the front benches.
I was trying to be more kind than that, but it's probably right. And that means the new leader, the new Prime Minister, will have the ability to pick somebody who's already been a good transport sector, somebody who's already been a good health sector, all those things. I keep I would keep Jeremy Hunt because he's got off to a good start in our job. I'd keep Ben Wallace because he's the rock upon which that policy, the defence policy.
And you don't think, by the way, that he's a possible future leader?
No, I think firstly, I mean, we need to focus on keeping Ukraine, as it were, under the thumb. The policy of Ukraine certain. We don't want to introduce any doubts into the Russians' minds about our commitment there. Secondly, he's a fantastic defence secretary, but I don't know how he'd cope with all the other technical things I was talking about. I mean, the two people I've talked about on this, Rishi and Penny, in my view, either themselves embody the technical skill or pull in under leadership the people who give the advice and the subordinate leadership to deliver it. So I think
a joint ticket would be quite good for you.
Well, it'd be so easy for me to stop me having to make a decision. but I'd love it if either of them.
David, thanks very much for coming in and talking. The time now is very nearly 20 minutes past 6. We've heard the main news of the day. We've talked a bit about runners and riders and the case for an early general election. But what about the personal qualities of whoever the new Prime Minister is? I'm thinking about their ability to talk to us effectively as well as to make hard decisions. I'm joined now by a long-time observer like me of many Prime Ministers, the legendary interviewer now on Channel 4, Andrew Neil. Andrew, welcome to the show. Can you remind people listening exactly how many big, significant, chunky interviews Liz Truss has done as Prime Minister or candidate?
I think that would be zero.
I think it
would. And of course, she suffered, and the country has suffered as a result, because I think a lot of what the big, proper, forensic, robust interviews would probably have rumbled her before she became Prime Minister. So it's a lesson for everybody.
And do you think, I mean, this is a self-serving question, I suppose, for both of us, but do you think that putting yourself up for interview is something that every senior politician should do, if only as a way of testing how strong their own arguments are of themselves?
Yes, it's testing themselves, but also letting the public see if they know what they're talking about. I mean, one of the problems through the leadership campaign, the one that was in the summer, was it was clear on several occasions that Liz Truss didn't know what she was talking about. And it was particularly clear when it came to economic matters that she didn't know what she was talking about. Now, we've all since discovered that she didn't know what she was talking about, hence the current mess that we're in. And, not every country has our culture of this robust, big, prime-time kind of interview. The Americans don't really do it anymore. The French are very deferential towards their president. The same with the Germans to their chancellor. This was part of our political culture, an important democratic part of it, and I think it'd be a great pity to lose that for voters and politicians.
And it was in the main dismantled by a certain Boris Johnson, we both recall, when that was going on, who is now apparently thinking about running again. Just cast your eye for me over the people that are now in front of the Conservative Party, Penny Mordaunt, Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson as the next Prime Minister.
Well, I think there's a big grown-up test coming here for the Tories now as to whether they are grown up and are prepared to put right the huge mistake that they have made. I mean, I think a lot of people will find it inconceivable that they can bring Boris Johnson back, given that it was only recently that they kicked him out and they threw him out. And we remember what his poll ratings were like, too. Now, with Liz Truss, the Tory party lumbered the country with someone that they had never heard of or barely knew. I mean, we know her and so on, but that's our job. Most people in the country had no idea. Not only did they didn't know, she turned out to be a clunker. Now, if they do that again, then it just shows that they're not grown up. And it may be that Mr. Johnson has support in the party and the country. It may be Penny Mordaunt has support of people like David Davis. What matters in our condition at the moment is who is most convincing to restore our credibility with the markets. And when you look at it that way, then the only
you'd say Rishi Sunak.
Well, if you imagine Rishi Sunak and Mr. Hunt staying at the Treasury, that is a powerful double act that will reassure the markets. I would be in no doubt about that whatsoever, and that will stop mortgage rates going even higher than they would.
That's a very good point, and we must bring it back to things like mortgage rates, because this is not a joke. I just wonder, however, if you're Jeremy Hunt and you're newly into the Treasury, feet under the desk, whether you're terribly happy to have a much more experienced ex-Chancellor sitting next door, keeping an eye on your homework.
Well, I mean, I don't think it does Chancellors any harm to have someone that knows what they're talking about. One of the problems with Boris Johnson was that he didn't know anything about economics. And it brought tensions between 10 and 11 Downing Street. Just as Tony Blair wasn't that hot on economics after that, which meant that Gordon Brown pretty much got his own way. I would have thought such is the overriding demand in Britain to restore this credibility that we have so carelessly thrown away, that having someone like Sunak and Mr. Hunt in 10 and 11 Downing Street is what the country needs, and they, I think, would both support each other. Whereas if you put Boris Johnson back into 10 Downing Street, Jeremy Hunt, by force of the markets, has had to become a fiscal conservative. Boris Johnson's never liked a spending plan that he's seen that he didn't want to spend the money on.
That's absolutely right.
Tensions in.
Andrew Neil, it's always a great pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining me this evening.